Do you remember the best day of your life? Well, I think when we're younger, we have the same day. To pick up on the girls that just went ahead of me, the little girl in me would have told you Christmas was the best day of my life every year. But I think as we get older, we realize that the best days of our lives are about people, not presents. So if you'd asked me that question again about 10 years ago, I would have given you the same answer. It was 2005. I just survived the coldest winter you could possibly imagine. You think this is cold? Anyone ever been to Regina, Saskatchewan? Okay. Oh, summer. Okay, well, they have their own problems in summer. Minus 55 in the winter. But my Caribbean blood thawed out, and I made it. Spring 2005, I graduated and I became a police officer with Canada's National Police Force, the RCMP. My mom was flying in to see me graduate. I was picking her up, and she knew I was coming, but what she didn't know was that for the very first time, I would be wearing my high-top brown boots, red wool serge jacket, and wide-brimmed Stetson hat, the familiar uniform of the Mounties. And I'll never forget it. She came down that escalator. Raise your hand if you're a parent. Now, isn't it true that parents can communicate with their children without saying a word? How do they do it? With a look. Now, my mom had this look in her eye, and I recognized it immediately. And when she got to the bottom of the escalator, she confirmed it. She gave me a big hug and said, "I'm proud of you, son." I looked up. Her eyes were full of tears. And have you ever tried not to cry? I tell you, that 28-year-old became 8 again. May 16th, 2005. Until the day I got married, that was the best day of my life. However, little did I know that just 6 years later it would be followed by one of the worst days. One spring day in 2011, I received a letter. Constable Millington, pursuant to Section 131 of the Criminal Code of Canada, you have been charged with perjury. I thought, really? I never did anything wrong. But I was charged with lying on the job. It was one of the worst days of my life. Until February 20th, 2015, I walked into a courtroom in Vancouver, British Columbia. A judge looked down at me and said, "Constable Millington, I find you guilty of perjury." I was sentenced to 2.5 years in jail for something I never did. That was one of the worst days of my life. Until October 31st, 2017, Halloween of all days. I lost my last appeal, and I was forced to turn myself into the Maplehurst Correctional Facility in Milton. Forced to trade in my 12-year career with the RCMP for what would eventually be 10 months in the Canadian correctional system. Forced to turn in my red jacket for an orange jumpsuit, and my home in Burlington for what would eventually be the Joyceville Correctional Facility in Kingston, which oddly enough actually has a Google review. I want to know who gave them that 1 star. I was placed in solitary confinement because, from what I've heard, cops and criminals don't mix well. Imagine this, sitting in an 11 by 7 foot cell, I'm 6 feet tall, with nothing but a metal bed, desk, sink. That was my home. Solitary confinement is reserved for prisoners as punishment. The average time in solitary is 2 to 7 days. I was there for 30. 30 days, 23 hours a day. To be honest, I don't know if I would have made it mentally if I didn't receive a gift from the guards after a week inside. It's almost like the book of Genesis. On the seventh day, God created the prison library. Have you ever read a book that's changed your life? Anyone? Well, for me, that book came on the lowest shelf of that little library. And when I took that book with a torn off cover back to my cell, it was as if all 309 pages spoke to me. Success is nothing more than a successful present moment. The primary cause of your unhappiness is not your situation, but your thoughts about it. Respond only to what the present moment requires. Have you ever done that? Thought about past, future, and forgot about the gift that's right now? Well, as I read that book, it was as if the author, Eckhart Tolle, was sitting right next to me reading his book, A New Earth, saying, Kwesi, you're stuck between the past and the future. It's funny, New Year's comes and we're thinking about Easter. Easter comes and we're thinking about summer vacation. Summer comes and what do you see? Back to school commercials. I was stuck between past and future, and that book left me with two questions. Question number one, what is wrong right now? And number two, what can you do right now? And as I faced that first question, what's wrong right now, I was forced with what I call the Jerry Springer effect. Raise your hand if you've ever seen Jerry Springer. Okay, you admitted it. That's good. Well, if you're like me, you probably watched it thinking one thought, my life may be bad, but at least it's not that bad. Well, believe it or not, as I read the book, I thought, yeah, the food's bad, but I have food. I have clothes. And I have a bed to sleep in. That's more than I can say for the homeless people that were in Kingston, homeless people that were in Toronto. And as I read through, believe it or not, gratitude washed over me in that solitary cell. And as I thought about the second question, I thought, what can I do now to make these, the worst day of my life, not remain the worst days? I thought in solitary, I had time to work on my mind. Any meditators in the room? Well, with 23 hours a day, you got some time to meditate. When I was transferred to the minimum security side of the prison, I thought, what can I do now I can give back? I was one of the few inmates with a high school diploma. I helped some of the other inmates get theirs. And when I was transferred to a halfway house in Hamilton, yay, woo, Hamilton, whoop! I was able to give back, and now I volunteer for 3 separate organizations. So I don't know what you've gone through. I don't know what your best days are and what your worst days have been, but I learned that the days of our lives are defined by the definition that we give them. And I can't control the past, and I can't control the future, but what I can do, as Toll says, is focus on now. So every morning I wake up every day and simply say, today is the best day of my life.